trouble with the link. Go ahead and hit record. Then we're going to go into a couple of other items. We're going to discuss some updates related to the MVP program. If we have a quorum at that time, we'll be discussing and voting on a letter of support for another MVP grant. We'll have some updates on the compost project and the Growing Better Great Barrington final report and next steps. And we'll have some time for citizens speak at the end. All right, I want to acknowledge that Aretha is here, who is our fourth committee member. So we do not have a quorum, so we're officially convened.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem at all. So that's good. We won't deliberate on anything until a little bit later in the meeting. Go ahead, Jovanina.
I just want to jump in. The other thing, actually immediately after this discussion is there is an event on May the 5th that is a continuation of some of the work from the MVP project from last year. So that immediately follows this. And I just wanted to say that as well.
Okay, yes, thank you. And I know we'll be able to discuss that a little bit related to MVP, but not exclusively. All right, well, let's go ahead and just kind of queue up our panel discussion for tonight. And thank you everyone again for being here. I'm just going to do a brief setup. Jovanina is going to talk about the structure of the way that we'll structure the time. We'll introduce our panelists and we'll have them speak a bit about their experience and thoughts about affordable housing in our community. So my name is Natalie Naratsky. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the chair of the Strategic Sustainability and Livability Committee, which is a town committee founded a few years ago. We have for a few years, been trying to discuss issues related to affordable housing and livability and their intersections with sustainability, but just in general. And I think we wanted to set up just what is a general conversation to take a step back. I think we as a culture, we tend towards action. We tend to find a policy option and enact it. And we really hope to frame this discussion as one that orients us to the landscape around us, that gathers information from some folks in the community that have perspectives informed by their work. There are many experts in this community on many issues. The folks that are here today, Jane, Chris, and Vivian, are folks that we have worked with our committee on a few projects in recent years that we've come to know through work on the food plan and through the MVP work. So we just hope that from here, after our discussion today, this can support our committee in working with other town officials and other community members in charting a potential course towards potential solutions that promote affordability, sustainability, and justice within this community. I would just encourage everyone to come here with an open mind and a kind heart and listen with your full selves and participate wholly in the discussion together. So I'm going to pass it just briefly to Jovanina to set up the structure of the panel, and then we will get started.
So we sent, do you want me to just mention the questions, or Natalie, are you going to do that after I'm?
Why don't you mention them and I'll try to put them on the screen if technology cooperates.
So in putting this panel together, we presented a list of questions to Jane and Vivian and Chris that we thought would be generative of a really informative and rich discussion tonight. And a little bit of it's cut off, but that's okay. These are the questions. There you go. So I'll let everyone read them. I don't need to read them out loud, I don't think. So we're just inviting the panelists they've already seen these questions, to speak organically and extemporaneously about these questions, and we're not necessarily structuring them because of the overlapping nature of these questions. And Natalie and I are going to moderate the discussion as needed, but pretty much we're also going to just be mostly in this part, in this sort of like 40 minutes, listeners along with everyone on at this meeting. And after around 40 minutes, and we're going to take down this slide so it's not distracting for us. After about 40 minutes, we're going to have a time of question and answers and open discussion, about 15 minutes. And we thought about how to structure that time, because there's quite a few people here and present. And we thought about using creating some equity around speaking, a stacking structure, and I don't know if everyone's familiar with it, so I'm going to describe it very briefly. During the discussion, you can raise your hand. I will take my pen and write your name down. So at any time in the 40 minutes, if you have a question or something that you know that you want to speak to during the time of open discussion, raise your hand. I'll write your name down, and then I will keep a stack. And when we come to the time of open discussion question and answers, I will then go through systematically that list. There are benefits to this process. It ensures that people who would like to speak get some time. The drawbacks of this process is that if person number 2 has a question that really generates a lot of excitement and dynamism, it's not then open to everyone then responding and talking. So then I still will, regardless of the energy that is maybe generated in all of us from person number 2's question, I will still go to person number 3. So just so that you know and your expectations are aligned with that structure, the pros and the cons of it. But just raise your hand in the Zoom controls. I will write it down. I'll be very attentive to that. And then lower your hand so that I'm not confused that you maybe have 2 questions. If you have 2 questions, I'm going to ask that you, in time, understand that you're going to go to that next part in the stack after other people have raised their hands. Kind of like a list in order. I hope this is clear. And I'll review at the end of this open discussion if needed.
Beautiful. Thank you. We've been doing Zoom for several years now, but it's hard to see the energy in the room and see your faces and all of that. So thank you, Giovannina, for developing a process. We'll see how it goes. So I'm going to pass it over just in just a second here to our panel. They will introduce themselves. They will do a better job than I will introducing them, but just wanted to put their faces up here. We've got Jane Ralph from Construct, Chris Rembold from the town of Great Barrington, and Vivian Orlovsky, who has multiple affiliations as a consultant and the chair of the AgCom with the town of GB. We'll let you introduce yourselves and why you're here, but just wanted to show. And again, we know that I'm looking at the participants panel. There's a ton of folks here who know so much and have contributed so much to the community. And we hope that you can bring some of your thoughts in when we get to discussion. Please put your hand in stack, and we look forward to having a robust discussion afterwards. So with that, we will pass it over to Jane, Vivian, and Chris.
Who would you like to go first, Natalie?
Oh, that's a good point. Well, I think we'll go a little organically with how you choose to answer the questions. But why don't we go in the order that I have on the slide? So we'll do Jane first, then Chris, and then Vivian, for at least your opening comments. Oh, okay. Jane's camera is a black box. I'm wondering if they're having a connectivity issue caused by my screen share. Are you back, Jane?
Yeah, I fell off for a minute.
I'm sorry, that was from my screen share. We won't do that again, I think. I'm not sure what you missed, but Giovannina just set up the process for the stack, and then we introduced you. So if you can go first to sort of introduce yourself and get started on the discussion, and then we'll pass it to Chris and then to Vivian.
Oh, sure. So as was said, I'm Jane Ralph. I'm the executive director of Construct. Construct's been providing affordable housing and support services in the South Berkshires and Great Barrington in particular for over 50 years. And we're a community-based organization. We're seeing just more of what I think we've always seen is kind of the simple answer to all the questions tonight. And part of why we think affordable housing is important is that folks ought to be able to live close to where their kids go to school, close to where they work. Communities thrive when folks can live in the communities they work in, go to school in, access the arts, and that includes folks who are vulnerable and working families and working individuals for that matter. I didn't hear whether I should say anything more than that or not.
Let's just do intros and then we'll pass it to Chris and then to Vivian and then we
Okay.
all can start discussion.
Okay, thanks. My name is Chris Rembold. I'm the Assistant Town Manager for the Town of Great Barrington and the Director of Planning and Community Development. And with those hats on, housing, and particularly affordable housing, is one of the issues that I deal with most often in a variety of ways for the town. Working with partners, nonprofit partners like Construct and Jane and the CDC of South Berkshire, with partners like Railroad Street Youth Project, with our committees, our Planning Board, Affordable Housing Trust Fund, this committee, the Agricultural Committee, because so much of our area economy and livability revolves around access to housing, access to healthy and affordable housing, whether it's homeownership or rental. So that's really a bedrock of everything that happens in Town Hall, and in particular in my office. So I'm happy to be here tonight and offer whatever insights and expertise I can and bring you up to date on what all of our partners are trying to do around this crisis.
Okay, can you hear me? Am I next?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to participate in this important discussion. I don't have the day-to-day expertise that Jane and Chris have, but I've lived full-time here in Great Barrington for more than 30 years. And I think it's just about 32 years now. And during that time, I've served on the Master Plan Committee, the Economic Development Committee, and the Agricultural Commission, which I've chaired since 2015. And all these committees, I've had the honor and pleasure of working with Chris Rembold on many of our projects. And apart from the town, for many years, I coordinated the Southern Berkshire Interfaith Clergy Association, the Religious Roundtable radio program on WSBS, and the annual celebration of the Martin Luther King Jr. National Holiday. I've been involved as a volunteer in other activities, such as the Berkshire Hills Regional School District's Farm to School Program Committee and Construct's Advisory Committee. And my work activities in the Berkshires have included public health emergency planning and environmental community education. And housing has been an important issue related to these diverse work and volunteer roles, as well as in my own life. And I was going to give a quick example. Let me do it now. I guess it could fit in later too. For example, what does the town's recently published food system plan have to do with housing? Well, Growing Better Great Barrington was based on community forums where many people emphasized how the housing crisis impacts those who work in the food system, from farming to processing to retail. With food prices and transportation costs rising rapidly, it makes sense to grow more food locally and process it locally and sell it locally. But how can we do that if people who are needed to work in the food system can't afford to live here? So access to healthy food also impacts everyone's budget, and thus rising prices in the food sector put additional squeeze on limited funds needed to pay for housing costs and utilities. So that's just one example of the interconnection of what we're dealing with, and which my own experience has allowed me to get various perspectives on. I guess the other connection I'd like to make is with the Master Plan Committee. It was 3 years of intensive work led by Chris, a phenomenal effort, also by about 16 other members of a committee that met monthly. And there's a very interesting section on housing. There are a lot of other sections that are relevant concerning the economy and development and land use. But the section on housing, I think, merits some discussion tonight, and I'll be glad to jump in on that later. And I hope that we can count on Chris for calling our attention to some timely aspects of the master plan.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. So we're going to go into our free flow discussion. I might just suggest that at least for your first comments, perhaps we can do that same order, Jane, then Chris, then Vivian, and then free flow from there. And the first couple of questions, just as a reminder, were what's your understanding of what's going on right now as it relates to affordability? What are the intersecting forces that impact this issue, which you've already touched on a bit? And what is currently being done to address that? So we'll go to Jane, then pass it to Chris, and then Vivian, and then you can flow organically from there and answer as many of these questions as you'd like and are able to. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. So the pandemic basically took a situation that was already tight, a tight housing market, especially for affordable and workforce housing, and just exacerbated all of that. It exacerbated the economic challenges, sustainability for not only tenants and people who pay mortgages, but also landlords. I was in full support of the eviction moratorium, but in the South Berkshires, that meant a lot of mom and pop landlords were really struggling and to make ends meet so that they could keep paying their mortgages so that they could actually provide a place to live for their tenants. And as it's gone on, of course, the other big thing with housing has been the boom of people coming in, and not just coming in, but people buying, because I don't really want to create an us and them, because I don't think that's helpful. I think one of the intersecting issues that's important anywhere, but especially here, is maintaining that sense of community, that we're in this together and that we can come up with solutions together from different perspectives. But I just was reviewing the Berkshire County Realtors first quarter Market Watch report, and it's really stunning how much has been sold: multifamily, single family, land, all of condominiums. All of it is really flying off the shelves, a little bit less so than it was. But what's really stunning is the amount of money that has passed. In 2017, the total amount of money spent in this quarter was around $2,700,000. In 2021, it was over 10,000, and this past quarter it was over 12 million, excuse me. Numbers that high hardly even register. So from 2,700,000 to 10,700,000 to 12,200,000. So the amount of money is just changed by leaps and bounds. And so that makes it very difficult for affordable home ownership, makes it very difficult for some of the really great programs that Great Barrington has to be accessed. And anytime there's tension, there's tightness in a system, those who live at the margins of the margins are going to be most squeezed by it. So we know, and we can get into this more later, but I just want to note it up front, that we know there's an intersection between racism and our history of housing in the United States. And that includes the Berkshires, it includes everywhere. Brown and Black families are overrepresented in homelessness, have been shut out of various markets through redlining historically, and in other ways as time goes on, with what we now call microaggressions, implicit bias, all of those kind of things. And so we have to be very intentional about addressing those things. Otherwise, we continue to perpetuate a very privileged approach to housing. I can say more, but I'll stop there.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Can't see you. Oh, there you go.
We can. I don't know if there's a slight delay, but try and we'll let you know.
I'll just turn my video off. I'm sorry, it's a little bit unstable, but you've all seen my picture already. Is that better?
Yes.
First of all, thanks to both Vivian and Jane for their examples of how interconnected the housing issue is with everything else we do, how we live, how we get our food, et cetera, et cetera. When we talk about housing numbers and prices and incomes, we focus on the dollar signs and the number figures, and we think in very personal terms sometimes. And both Jane and Vivian went right into the system as a whole, and just how important and wide-ranging how important housing is. Before I give you some horrifying numbers to piggyback on what Jane did, so what are we doing to address the housing crisis? First of all, conversations like this are fantastic. The town has a lot of active programs going on. Before COVID, the planning board in particular and other organizations like the Housing Trust Fund have had innumerable successes in regulations, in funding. So the Community Preservation Act and the Housing Trust Fund have funded a lot of affordable housing activity over the last 8 years. These are real successes. We've rewritten the zoning bylaw to allow for the creation of more housing units in various places, particularly in walkable places where you can get to transit, you can get to the senior center or other facilities that you might need. So those are big successes, and we should pat ourselves on the back. Our nonprofit partners like Berkshire Housing, the CDC, Construct have built 100+ rental units. That's tremendous. That is absolutely tremendous. But here are the scary numbers. And COVID has made it all worse. By some estimates, the actual income that a two adult, 2-person, 2 children household, so a total of 4 people, need to live pretty well. The sort of cost of living in Great Barrington is about $140,000 a year. Needless to say, most of us don't approach that. To afford about a $300,000 home, you need, let's say, $90,000 per year. These are just rough numbers. In 2019, according to the Berkshire County Board of Realtors, for Great Barrington, the average sales price of single-family homes, I think this is single-family homes, was $411,000. So already we're in a hole. In 2020, it jumped from $411,000 to average sales price of almost $600,000. And in 2021, the average sale price for Great Barrington was $652,000. In 2018, the difference between the census estimated median income for Great Barrington, median household income, census estimates that at $56,000 thereabouts. That's the median. Remember what I said about the kind of cost of living and what a household of 4 would need, $140,000. So the census says median is really around $56,000. So we're already in the hole. The median sales price in 2018 for a single family home was $345,000. The typical household can't touch that. In fact, they're to the negative $130,000. It's just simply not affordable. It got worse in 2020, where the median sale price went up again, as I said, to $466 or thereabouts. So the difference between what a household can afford and what's actually out there was $253,000. And in 2021, it went up again. That gap went up again. It worsened, it deepened. The median listed price in Great Barrington in 2021 was $510,000. That's a difference of almost $300,000 between what a typical median household could afford and what is actually out there on the market. So that's really, really scary. What was a crisis has gotten terribly worse. As both Jane and Vivian said, this is the impacts of this type of crisis, whether it's in ownership or in renting units, is felt across the board. We know that those impacted by the crisis, those frontline workers are impacted often first, worst, and longest, as we've said over the last few years of our climate change and vulnerability training. We know that farmers who are on limited incomes can't afford to farm, even though we all need access to local fresh food, particularly when supply chains are stretched and fuel prices are high. We know that landlords still need to keep those housing units healthy and clean and operable. So this has just a snowball of impacts. Where else should I go? What have I missed? Or should I turn it over to Vivian before I get too dark? Vivian, why don't you go ahead and we can
yeah, we'll
back.
keep cycling back. Thank you,
Yeah.
Chris.
I'm going to start with another depressing piece of data. It's not quite as fresh as yours. I think I researched it last year and from the Boston Globe. A little bit of a different, often the affordable housing issue focuses on people in the workforce, and rightly so. But there's a whole nother layer of affordability challenges for those who are older and longtime residents often. And the Boston Globe reported that Massachusetts tops the nation in a new index of economic insecurity for elders living alone. And about more than 6 in 10 or 60% fall short of having enough income for just living expenses, food, housing, healthcare, and transportation. And this is called the Elder Economic Security Standard Index that was compiled by the Gerontology Institute at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And for couples, it's a little bit better for older couples, but the state ranks 3rd in the whole country after Vermont and New York in economic insecurity for seniors in 2-person households. So that's nearly 30% of 2-person households who are seniors fall below the livability level. So 60% for the singles and 30% for the 2-person households. So even though, as I say, we certainly should have a focus on our younger people out of school and entering the workforce, or those who are already in the workforce and want to move from a rental to for example, to buying a house or being able to afford a rental. That's not the whole picture. There's a whole generational aspect to this that I think also needs attention. And I say that representing that that generation myself. But it affects both renters and homeowners. For example, older renters may have had a long-term stable house or apartment rental, and due to all the constraints we just talked about, increases in all sorts of costs for the landlords and just the market pressures, they may face unaffordable rent increases or not even being able to continue living in the same place, even if they can come up with the extra rent or get help to come up with it, due to having the house sold because the market is booming and the landlord feels insecure. And one way out for the landlord is just to sell the whole house or the whole, multifamily building or something like that. And then you'd say, oh, well, but many longtime older residents have had a chance to own their own home from the times that things weren't so extreme and more people could afford owning homes. But retirees who are on fixed income, who may own their own homes, may not be able to continue living in the same house or even in the same neighborhood due to the rising costs of utilities and property taxes, along with the other economic pressures that we talked about, food and transportation. And I think we can learn from some suggestions getting away from this continued dismal picture throughout generations. I think we can go back to the goals and recommendations of the master plan to look for some more innovative approaches, some of which have already been accomplished, like creating the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which was back in 2010 to 2013 when we were writing the master plan. That didn't exist. That came later. And also promoting an accessory dwelling unit program for zoning that didn't exist, and now we have that. But I think there are ways to expand on some of these suggestions, and I'll get into that later. I don't want to take too much time now.
Yeah, thank you for those. Wow, I'm not going to respond to all of what you laid out, but thank you for sharing numbers, which I think back up so much of what we see. And when we talk to our friends and family and we see what's going on in the community, numbers tell powerful stories. Feel free to take the discussion anywhere that y'all would like to go, but would love to hear, especially as you can, just what is currently being done to address this issue, what's going on at town meeting coming up, any updates on use of town infrastructure funding. Feel free to go wherever you'd like, but would love to hear more about what is currently being done that you all may be able to share.
One of the things I'm really excited about, well, it's more than one thing, but Great Barrington really has done a great job of responding quickly to the COVID crisis, and especially the rental crisis. Construct was one of the first entities that was able to provide COVID-related rental assistance, and that's almost completely due to the fact that the affordable housing trusts in Great Barrington and Lenox were willing to fund those things. We were then able to get other private funding to do more COVID-related rental assistance before RAFT got expanded, before some of those things were able to move faster. And Construct really shifted gears from being an organization that primarily provided hands-on support, but not a lot of money behind it, to doing the hands-on, but really putting a lot of money into the hands of landlords on behalf of their tenants, as long as they were willing to not evict them.
That was fast. That was early on.
That was like
the housing
May
trust
2020.
was funded, and they were able to fund the emergency rental program, and that was a huge success early on.
And we're still going, because there still are people that either have difficulty accessing RAFT or are not able to access RAFT. So that's been a really positive shift that we've been able to make. And I think our use of technology, in spite of the fact that I keep falling off Zoom, has really helped our ability to reach people who need to stay home for health and safety reasons. And I concur with Vivian that there are many more seniors seeking our services and wondering if they can stay in the home they're in, whether it's rental or a home that they own, and not knowing what they're going to do if they do have to move out. And I guess the only other thing I want to say is that content, the ability to do those things, was incredible. But the reason it worked so well was the strong relationships it's possible to have with the town of Great Barrington, with the various committees, with the community partners we have. The Rural Health Network went full steam ahead as soon as COVID hit and started having resource meetings on a weekly basis where we could get together and brainstorm and figure out what we needed to do and just get support from our community partners. And that's been something that I hope we're able to sustain long after when the pandemic becomes an endemic.
One of the questions was, what are the intersecting forces that are causing this housing issue? I mean, there are so many, and so many of them were here before COVID. In fact, many of them were here for the last 150 years. If you go back and read literature about Berkshire County in the 1880s and the post-Civil War era, this was an area that was, highly prized for people from the cities to move up to, and it's been that way ever since. I think that was kind of magnified during COVID, and it tends to be magnified during every crisis that particularly impacts urban areas. Whether it's 9/11 or COVID, areas like Great Barrington and Berkshires have been impacted particularly hard. But there's bigger issues. Mortgage rates have been low. A lot of people have had a lot of money to spend. All of these things, the demand, et cetera, the easy money, relatively easy money has driven up prices incredibly. The supply in Great Barrington has been demonstrated to be severely low. We see that in the Berkshire County Board of Realtors data. We see that in a 0% rental vacancy rate in Great Barrington. So there's this incredible supply, this very, very limited demand. And
Reverse that.
I'm sorry, very incredible demand and a very, very limited supply.
Just checking to see if we're listening, huh?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I was going towards,
I heard it the right way.
yeah, I was going towards the rosy future already. I skipped the hard work. You know, so we have to address all of these things. And we've thrown a good bit of money to this issue already through the CPA and through our partners. And our partners, as I said, have raised a lot of money to build a lot of new units. But in Great Barrington and in the Berkshires, we're not going to be able to build our way out of a supply crunch. There's just not that much land available. Construction costs are through the roof. They were bad before, and they're more so now. If you could build a house for $250 a square foot now, that would be cheap. I think it's probably in the $350 per square foot. So a modest house, you know, for example, a modest house of 1,000 square feet, that's small. That's $350,000. That's not including the land. And remember the prices I quoted earlier. This is not even a price that people around here could touch. So building new is expensive, and it takes a long time. The CDC construct have hit a lot of home runs. They've built 45 units here, 11 units there. That's fantastic, but we need a unit here, a unit there every day, every week, a unit that already exists, that we don't have to spend time and money building and going through a permitting process. So I'm hopeful that groups like the Planning Board and Select Board Housing Subcommittee, the Housing Trust, and all of our partners can dig deeper into those issues, getting money towards people now to incentivize getting homes and rental units on the market now. Our seniors, our workers need the units now. We have restaurants and downtown businesses whose people are commuting from the Hudson Valley and the Connecticut Valley on a daily basis. Not sustainable. That is not the basis of a workforce. So I'm hopeful we can address some of those things, and we've got a lot of good brains and a lot of energy and dedication behind it. I'll stop there.
Well, I'd like to bring up a couple of things, how we can learn from other towns and other states to find innovative ways to keep older residents in their homes and to develop mutually beneficial intergenerational programs to help provide for younger people. And I'd like to start with a state program that was enacted decades ago. It sits there on the books and a lot of people don't pay attention to it. Over time, about 100 Massachusetts towns have updated this old statute called 41A, and they're offering their seniors without having to raise taxes on any other residents, basically a no-cost program, the ability to do senior tax deferral. And it enables seniors to, who are longtime older residents, you have to meet a residency requirement, to use their own financial resources to stay in their homes. For example, when they're faced with a healthcare crisis, a family emergency, or major home repair, that would mean that they can't afford to take care of those needs, which are immediate, and pay their increasing amount of property taxes each year. And it's very simple. It's basically a 2-page application. If you meet the age, income, and residence requirements, the assessor reviews it, and if approved, you have to sign an agreement to place a lien on your property until the taxes are paid, plus interest, annual interest. And that's usually when people sell their house or condo, or when they pass away. And tax rates are not affected. No one else's tax rates are raised. And decades of experience in other towns, often with those with 2 or 3 more people, for example, like Sudbury, show that even programs with very low interest rates, like 0.25% or 2%, have fewer than 20 people per year who qualify for this benefit. So yes, that's not a big deal, but year after year, it can be different people depending upon your circumstances. Most people can manage to pay their taxes one way or the other year after year, but it's when these crises occur that this would serve as a safety net. And it would not only benefit seniors, but it also reduces financial burdens that they may have to draw on their family to help them with. And it helps enhance neighborhood stability, stay near family and friends in the same neighborhood where many people have lived for decades, and keeping seniors from adding to the already intense competition for renting or buying less expensive homes or apartments. I mean, do we really want people who are out of the market to add those to the market along with everyone else looking for affordable rentals or that elusive low cost purchase? And it reduces the turnover prices and real estate valuations. And that also reduces possible conversion to short-term rentals, which we're not dealing with now, but that's up to the select board. But it's something that we certainly don't necessarily want to promote. How we do with it is another issue. This state law is already on the books. The problem is it was enacted decades ago, and the state statute says this is only available to those who have $20,000 a year or less annual income. So that doesn't cover many people these days. In those days, when they passed it, that was a decent annual income. So what other towns are doing in order to expand this, they go to town meeting and they pass a resolution, a warrant article to increase the income. And the select board reviewed this, and in December they suggested 40,000 as a moderate income, which would be the maximum that you could earn and still qualify for the deferral. And then the other problem is that the interest rates were much higher then. So the state statute says 8% interest. And even though interest rates are going up, they're not going up that much. So I believe the select board is recommending either 4 or 5% interest. And
Vivian?
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you could wrap up this point, I want to move on to a few other points before we move into Q&A. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay,
though.
I just have one or two things to add so that people know what to expect at town meeting. So yeah, at town meeting, people will be asked to follow these recommendations, which not only come out of the select board and the finance committee, but were reviewed by the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the Council on Aging, the select board and planning board subcommittee on housing. And they all unanimously endorsed it. The select board actually didn't unanimously endorse it. One member actually wanted lower interest rates, so we voted against it. But otherwise, it seems to be consensus that this doesn't cost the town anything. It doesn't raise anyone's taxes, and it's actually a way of allowing people to help themselves, essentially. Previously, this was endorsed by an editorial in the Berkshire Eagle, and the Massachusetts Council on Aging for the state, and the Governor's Council to Address Aging in Massachusetts, and the Boston College Center for Retirement Research did an extensive study and encouraged a much more active statewide program along these lines. But they certainly, Vivian? I've been in touch with them, and they certainly encourage local governments to do what they can in the meantime. That's it.
Okay, so I apologize. I know we have some other things to cover and want to make time for Q&A. Feel free to send me any documents and we'll try to get everything uploaded to the town website after this meeting.
Sure.
So I think we'll take about maybe 5 to 7 more minutes just for the panel. We have a rich stack of questions from participants already. We want to make time to get to them as well as other agenda items. So what I'm thinking of asking is if Chris, Jane, and Vivian, if you want to take maybe 2 to 3 minutes each to kind of insert any final comments, things that are being worked on, things that you wanted to mention, and we'll have more time in the Q&A to cover a bit more. So me pass it to Chris, then Jane, then Vivian to wrap up, about 5 to 7 more minutes of presentation.
I've frozen again.
No, we can hear you.
I think we can hear you.
Maybe he can't hear us.
Can you hear me okay at this point?
Yes.
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 Sorry. I have to keep stopping my video, so I apologize. So part of Vivian's description of that program is, it's really important to keep people who are in their homes affordably, critical. So I think there's a number of other things that can be done on that score. And I'm excited that the planning board and just received a grant for some technical assistance to look into this. How do we incentivize people who, there may be seniors, there may be households in town who need to stay in their homes. They need money for repairs. Homes in Great Barrington tend to be really, really old. Energy hogs, they're expensive to heat and maintain. So getting low or no interest loans to people who qualify as seniors or low or moderate income to make repairs is critical. How about incentives to rent units, accessory units, or portions of homes to low or moderate income households? Only one other town has done that, I think, through a property tax abatement or incentive. I don't know what the right word is. And that's Provincetown. It takes special state legislation to do it. So it's something that we can look into. Incentivizing, providing funds for households to look at how to build an extra unit, an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit in their yard, going through the permitting process with them. Once that unit is built, maybe the increased taxes on that land can be phased in. So people aren't, so cash can get to people who need the cash and can create a unit, and then they're not demolished by the taxes that come with the extra unit. So things like that, I think, should be looked at, and I'm happy to say the planning board will be able to do that. Those are some of the efforts that we're looking at. I'm also interested in things, other very heavily touristed areas like Rocky Mountains and seacoasts are dealing with issues that we're dealing with, and they're looking at things like purchasing affordable housing restrictions on homes. So if I'm a household that needs cash now, the town would purchase the affordable housing restriction. I would get the cash in hand, and in return, that house would be then permanently affordable. It's similar to buying an agricultural preservation restriction to preserve farmland, or a historical preservation restriction to preserve a historic building. In this case, you're simply purchasing future sales proceeds up front. So things like that, I think, could be really helpful. It takes money. It takes buy-in from partners, boards, committees, and particularly town meeting. But there are tools out there, and we have a lot of, as I said before, a lot of people around this issue who can help. So I'll pause there.
A couple of things I would love to see are is more. The mechanism would be getting more funds into the hands of the Affordable Housing Trust, which can more nimbly respond to issues as they come up. So I think that would make an awful lot of sense. One of the barriers for Construct creating more affordable housing is being able to actually acquire the property, whether it's to renovate a property or land. If we can't be competitive and get in there and get site control, then we can't go after the funding, because that's a longer process, but you have to have site control to do it. And so if there could be, one of the things that the CDC of Pioneer Valley has done is create a revolving housing development fund. So they can tap into that to get that down payment to secure the land, get an acquisition loan, and then basically pay themselves back so that that money can be used again and again and again. And I think a town the size of Great Barrington could potentially have that housed at the Affordable Housing Trust. And then many of us who do affordable housing development could access that. I think that would help a great deal. I love the idea of more deed restrictions on affordable home ownership. It's really a great opportunity because there is a multiplier effect. So if someone buys that home affordably, it doesn't mean that they have to sell it for exactly what they bought it for. There is a multiplier effect. So they still are able to get their equity out of the house. And if they make improvements on the house, they can get that out as well. We did that in Beckett, and we're helping the Lenox Affordable Housing Trust do that in Lenox. So three houses are being sold affordably. It's very interesting. We assumed we'd be overrun with applications, and we weren't. And I've done some research into that as well. And the Habitat for Humanity of Addison County in Vermont, among others, has found the same thing, that there just isn't the consumer confidence that you might expect. Somebody may be paying more than they can really afford in rent, but they've learned how to do that. And so the thought of actually making this huge investment in a piece of property is just something that's too overwhelming in this climate. And so finding ways to work with our financial institutions to increase consumer confidence that this could be done. There are lots of programs out there that make it affordable. Smitty Pignatelli earmarked some funds that we're administering to help make it more affordable. So the help is there, but it's a daunting thing to buy a house, and especially the first time. Those are the big things I think that I see as most important. What Construct has decided, well, we haven't decided for sure. What I think we want to do is expand our existing properties so that we're using the space more efficiently and more effectively on properties where we know it's working already. So we're looking into the feasibility of that rather than necessarily trying to acquire more property, although we'd like to do that as well.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to Q&A just a moment. Vivian, do you have a final comment or two? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just follow up on what Jane just said and then what Chris said. Yeah, Jane, one of the things that occurred to me is that in housing that you're trying to keep affordable, obviously people have to qualify, but once they're in, here again, they can have crunches on their income due to job changes or unemployment or illness or whatever. And I was wondering whether investing more in your existing housing, you would be able to perhaps get grants for adding the opportunity for community gardening so that people would have an affordable source of fresh, healthy food right at their doorstep or nearby where they live.
We actually do have that at 3 of our properties in Stockbridge, Lee, and a small community garden at Forest Springs.
That's great. That's great. I remember talking to you about that at Forest Springs way back before it was even.
Yep. Thanks to Green Agers for building the boxes, and that's really worked well.
Absolutely. And also the other thing is to encourage. I know when you build, you do encourage energy efficiency, but for clients who may not be in your houses, but those that you're trying to help, connecting them with support for more energy efficient measures. And then Chris, you talked about things that I was going to get back to, and they are based in the master plan. But I'd like to make the connection as a mutually beneficial intergenerational programs in the sense that by helping older people with the ADU process and financing, you can help someone younger live in that ADU and help the older person then afford their home due to increased income, especially, as you say, if they're not burdened with major new tax increases. But I did a little research in California, and they have another related program called the Junior ADU. And I haven't followed the discussion that closely, in the planning board, but has that ever come up? Because that in some ways is much less daunting than building a whole new unit or, doing a big extension on the original house. It's taking part of one of these older, larger houses and doing some less expensive work to create a separate living area, often with an efficiency kitchen, sometimes with a bathroom, or sometimes the statutes in California allow even shared bathrooms. And as long as they meet certain minimum criteria, it's not like having a roommate because there is a separate space, but it does provide a living space and income.
Yeah. Well, the planning board has been really proactive looking at maybe not necessarily, what did you call it? Tiny ADUs. I'm sorry. But
Junior
ADUs, but ADUs in general, looking at little things that most of us wouldn't really think of, like how much of a typical building lot can you build on, and do the requirements of that, those types of requirements, do they restrict us from adding that little bit onto our house or adding a floor to our garage? So we haven't called it junior ADUs, but the planning board's work and research and efforts have focused on, where it's possible, let's allow that type of construction to occur. So, now I think it's incentivizing that construction and
yeah, absolutely.
I think it will be the next step. Yeah.
Yeah, California does a lot with grants and technical assistance and really holding people's hands, so to speak, through the process, because especially it's often older people who have a house that can be used for this. It would be great. Yeah.
There's already some businesses in town who are looking at ways to house multiple employees in one spot, shared kitchens, shared rooms, etc. Oftentimes reusing existing buildings if they can find them, but looking at kind of non-traditional and intergenerational setups. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you to the three of you for that amazing set of information. I am overwhelmed and inspired and have a lot churning. I'm going to pass it to Giovannina now. We have quite a stack going of questions, and she's going to facilitate about 15 minutes of Q&A after the panel. So I'm going to pass it to you, Giovannina, to do that part. And thank you again, the three of you, for bringing the wealth of information to all of us tonight.
We don't have actually a large stack, which it might grow as we move into this next part of this aspect of our meeting. So the first person is Eileen Mooney, and then Carrie Ann Petrick, and then I'm third on the stack. And I will definitely still keep track. So if, again, as people are talking, if other questions arise, raise your hand, I'll keep track and I'll call on you.
Eileen, I just gave you a permission to speak. So you may need to unmute yourself, but you should be able to jump in.
Okay.
Go ahead, Eileen, we can hear you.
Oh, I think, okay. All right, she might need to unmute again. That was my bad. I promoted her to panelist. Okay, sorry. You might need to unmute yourself one more time. Sorry, Eileen.
All right. Okay, now?
You're good.
Good. Okay, this is probably primarily for Chris, but the town has appropriated, what, $850,000 for affordable housing? Some of what you were just describing, is that how the money will be used? I'm wondering when the plan is going to be presented.
Good question. So Eileen said that the town has earmarked $850,000 for affordable housing purposes. That is through the ARPA, ARPA, or American Rescue Plan Act. Those are the federal recovery funds that have gone to states and counties and municipalities. A week or so ago, the select board in Great Barrington adopted staff's recommendation that the bulk of the first round of our ARPA funding, the ARPA totals over $2 million, and we recommended a first round of funding of $1,850,000 of that 1 million will be for affordable housing type purposes. I have my own short list from a staff perspective. There are a number of important initiatives underway that could use support in the very near term. That includes, and this is not the list. This is just ideas, Eileen. It could include the Affordable Housing Trust's work on North Plain Road in the partnership with Habitat for Humanity. It might include work at the Houstonic School. It could include support of our partners. Both the CDC and Construct are looking at acquiring and or building new units at land that they own or could acquire. And yes, it could go towards programs like this, buying affordable housing restrictions, affordable housing rehabilitation grants and loans, additional COVID-related emergency rental assistance, like Jane was talking about earlier. So I think it could cover all of these expenses. I think it could also cover household expenses that are related, just to household living, which might include transportation, food, utilities, other types of household assistance. So we'll be working on that in very short order. So take those as ideas, not as a final list, if you would.
I'd add childcare as one of those allowable expenses that's really been a challenge for folks getting back to work.
Yeah, that came up high on the community survey that we did as well. So, and again, that's just the first half of the $2 million of federal funds. What we do with the next half could be similar, it could be very different depending on the needs, the directions that the select board, what the select board hears and what directives it gives to staff. So we'll see.
Eileen, do you feel complete, or is there anything
No,
else?
I have a follow-up.
Okay, go ahead.
Is anything going to be presented at town meeting?
As it relates to the use of the ARPA funds?
To using the ARPA funds?
I don't anticipate that. The ARPA funds aren't subject to voter appropriation. So it doesn't need to go through that process. And I don't anticipate a formal presentation at town meeting on the ARPA funds.
I was thinking of the concept of what might be done rather than the approval to use the funds. But, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think, we'll
There's
try
a
to
number of
communicate.
CPA requests for affordable housing. There's some really exciting opportunities there.
There are. Thanks, Eileen. We will communicate that in other ways, maybe not take the time of town meeting, but we'll try to get that out in other ways at other forums.
Good, thank you.
Eileen, do you feel complete?
I'm complete. Sure.
Then Carrie Ann.
Is it my turn?
It is your turn. Welcome.
Oh, great. Thank you. My name is Carrie Ann Petrick. I serve Great Barrington as the regional coordinator for the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, and I live in New Marlborough, Massachusetts. And this conversation has been really interesting to me, and in my role as regional coordinator working with the 51 most rural communities of the state, I'm pretty familiar with how so many problems face multiple municipalities, but because of how municipalities function, we tend to get very locked into our municipal borders. And as the panelists were all speaking, you know, I was thinking a lot about how, you know, Great Barrington is very much an economic hub for the Southern Berkshires, and that many of the folks, for example, who work in Great Barrington would not necessarily live in Great Barrington. For many years prior to my work right now, having done many service industry jobs, I didn't necessarily live in Great Barrington, but yet that was where I went to work. And so I'm curious about what the thinking is about how to take this conversation beyond municipal borders and thinking about it from a regional perspective. And if there are any examples that you think that you could talk about of how that's been successful, and or how individuals from outlying Great Barrington communities can help support those types of initiatives.
I'd like to hop on that first, if that's okay. Another silver lining, and I don't know that it was of COVID, but that we started working on at the beginning of COVID, was a regional plan for the Berkshires to address housing needs more broadly, not just affordable housing, workforce housing, housing at all levels. And recently, a housing vision for the Berkshires came out. One Berkshire really led the charge in that. Chris and I were both involved with those discussions, and there will be ongoing work across those borders, not just within the South Berkshires, but across the county, which is really wonderful. The other thing that we're really interested in doing, and we haven't figured out how to do, is do scattered, and this may get too much in the weeds, so I'll just put it out there, and I'm happy to talk more offline, but a scattered site low-income tax credit project. So it would be getting the benefit of that low-income tax credit, but not necessarily having to build all 45 or more units in one place. And across municipalities would be really great. We're in conversation with some folks about how that might work, but we haven't quite figured it out. The challenge with that is if you're doing a LIHTC project, that means you end up being a for-profit entity. And so then you're hit with the taxes as well. And I think that that's the taxes going up, I think has been an unexpected expense for some developers. So I think that potentially puts the low income tax credit process a little bit at risk. But thank you, Carrie Ann. I think you're absolutely on target with that.
Yeah, the regional report that Jane mentioned was important. I want to shift it also a little bit to let folks know that one of the things that was identified in our MVP municipal vulnerability preparedness process, in addition to housing, in addition to food access, in addition to access to parks, was transportation. That is definitely a regional issue, and it helps those folks who live in outlying towns get into Great Barrington and to employment centers. So we're working on that as well.
I'd like to add one thing, that another way that Great Barrington can help the region is by pioneering certain things. For example, if no other town in the Berkshires has offered the senior tax deferral, whereas I say dozens and dozens throughout the rest of the state have. So when the Berkshire Eagle covered this proposal, they recommended that other towns look into it. But you know how it is, until they see it work in one place that they can identify with, it's more difficult to get towns and more conservative towns to go that way. But that's a no-cost option that any town, large or small, in the Berkshires can adopt. Another thing is with the ADUs and the junior ADUs, or whatever we call them around here. If we move more in that direction, then other towns might recognize the value of that and come to learn from us. it's a responsibility, but it also can have a multiplier effect.
Karen, do you feel complete? Is there anything that you would like to add?
That's a deep question, Jovanina.
Okay, well, limited to this discussion.
I mean, I would just like to say that at some point, if there was like a group that was interested in having a conversation, thinking about the relationship of climate adaptation, climate migration, and affordable housing and those intersections, I would be very interested in that. Those are conversations that I am having in some of my other communities. And I think that there, with some very specific focus, that there could be some interesting opportunities to move that conversation forward.
We would love to be part of that conversation for sure.
And I would love that, Jane. Now I feel complete, Jovanina.
Thank you.
At least for this existential moment.
Exactly.
So I'm noticing the time. I'm going to put my question out there. This is a large, challenging question, and one that's come up in many different places. And if you all want to speak to it briefly, you can. I just know that it's going to be ongoing. And that is to what you said, Jane, that I just appreciated so much, that it's difficult. I've only lived here since 2014. That's 8 years. It's difficult to not think in an us versus them. I'm noticing that kind of mindset really arise in myself. And I know that I'm not alone. And so I really appreciated that you said so clearly that's not helpful. And I agree with you. And so how can this be a we conversation where people who have moved here because it's many things that people value also, become aware of this particular and other really crises that they are now in a community that is trying to address.
Go ahead, Jane.
Thanks. For once, I'm actually trying to think before I open my mouth to speak. I think it takes relationship building. It takes community engagement. It takes listening in very particular ways when it gets uncomfortable. It requires being willing to be uncomfortable with ideas different than my own. I think why that's going to be possible and is possible here in the Berkshires is I think it's a pretty hospitable place. Folks like their neighbors. Folks want to get engaged in community. I moved here from Vermont a little bit after you did, Jovanina, in 2016. And I'm amazed at the difference between the more resorty towns here and the more resorty towns in Vermont, that there's much more engagement from second homeowners, from visitors. There's not 100%, because that's not the case anywhere, but there's much more sense of a recognition of what it takes for a town to thrive and to be sustained. And we have those conversations all the time across all kinds of income levels, across all kinds of lines of difference. And I think that needs to happen more and more and more. And I think there's lots of folks very capable of having those conversations. And then coming to places that we may not have expected to be to get solutions. I think when it becomes antagonistic, it's usually because somebody's scared or hurt or whatever. And so having a place where, a brave space where those conversations can happen with the discomfort.
Vivian, you had your hand up. I don't want to jump in front of you.
Not about this question. I have another question.
Well, if I can just add briefly, so I agree with everything Jane said. And I would add that the more conversations we have about the impacts of the housing crisis on our town, on our seniors, on our workers. If we can't house workers, if we don't have home health care nurses or people to drive the senior van or people to fight fires, these are existential issues for any town. And every town deals with this us and them issue to some extent. I think we all have to be intentional in our listening and in our outreach, as Jane said. We all have something to offer. Great Barrington would not be the town it is today without the incredible efforts of so many people who were not born and raised here, but have moved here and formed groups like the CDC of South Berkshire, Construct, et cetera. I could go on and on. So there shouldn't be an us and them. There naturally is wherever we go, but we do have to be ready to have conversations like this, to get the facts out there, to have conversations, to tell stories, and not go to the extreme reactions that we see so often when we're scared, when we see misinformation on social media. We need to be ready to step back and have conversations like this and see how we can work together. Thanks.
I appreciated what you both said. I don't know, Vivian, if you want to add to that, but I feel momentarily complete. Or if you just want to jump to your question.
Yeah, I'll follow up briefly on that, and then I'll move on to what I had in mind when I originally raised my hand a few minutes ago. From my experience, I think the faith community, our religious institutions, are a great place for new people and all longtime townies to meet on common ground and get involved in their own religious community as well as the broader community, because most churches and synagogues have very active social activities, social well-being activities. For example, it was the Clergy Association that started Construct originally, and not officially, but through the efforts of the members of the faith community. And another meeting ground is through our school system for parents and grandparents for their kids are going to meet all sorts of kids and hopefully get and become friendly, and the parents and grandparents can also learn about other people that way, from both ends of the newcomers and the old timers type of perspective. And I had two questions actually, and one of them did concern the school system. I mean, one of the things we always talk about, and Chris kind of alluded to it, is even people who are not in need of affordable housing are in need of the people who need affordable housing. And he gave some examples like firefighters and nurses, but another example that's often given are our teachers and staff in our school system. And I was wondering whether we might invite a dialogue with Peter Dillon and others from the school system about thinking about this new major project that they're talking about and how it might include a modest housing component for those who work there. It would reduce commuting time, and it would help solve the problem for younger families who would be working in the school system, especially now there's going to be a lot of retirement of the older teachers and staff, and new people are going to come in, but where are they going to live? So maybe some of them, here again, it would have to be a modest effort, but I think any effort in that direction opens new possibilities, and I would encourage us thinking about that. And my last point was actually a question for Chris and Jane, or anybody else who might know. I haven't had a chance to look into it. the state got ARPA funding, and along with what was allocated to municipalities, since we don't have a county system, the state also had lots of money to spend. And how much of that is presents opportunities for us to be part of state programs that will impact housing?
It definitely expands the pot of money that's available from the state for affordable housing. And as I understand it, DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, that's it, is also looking at workforce housing. They're understanding that that's a need. And the technical definition is folks living at 80% to 120% of area median income. We know that there's lots of workers that are living, in our apartments and are making less than 60% of area median income. But they're looking at those things. They're also looking at smaller projects. They've also funded at a much higher level the rural small town initiative. It's called something else now, but a small town initiative that allows a town to apply for funds to expand affordable housing. And we've assisted Egremont in getting that. We've assisted Beckett in getting it. So there are more pathways, largely through DHCD, but through some other HUD sources as well. We're part of the 3-county continuum of care for housing and homelessness, which tends to focus on homelessness and homelessness prevention, and a housing first model where you don't go to shelter, you're able to get into housing right away, where you don't have to move, after a period of time.
And of course, the state funds for infrastructure, hopefully more for education, hopefully the MVP program. There's funding through the Recovery Act, through the state budget, through the Community Preservation Fund, that we've been receiving better surplus contributions from the state into our Community Preservation Act. So all of that allows us to shift money if we have to the housing crisis, if we don't, if we can get grants in other ways. So it's great that there's a lot of technical assistance and a lot of financial assistance out there.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was going to say that probably we could keep going, and we have other agenda items on our meeting that are important to get to tonight. So I want to, I'm handing it back over to you, Natalie.
Great. Well, I want to thank Chris, Jane, and Vivian, and everyone for participating in the discussion, for raising your questions, for coming with your whole selves. I work with policymakers all the time, and I'm trying to push down that tendency to what's my list of next steps, and just appreciate all that you all laid out: the data, the information, the landscape, and the intersectionality of what we're experiencing in this community. I'm going to process that for a few days and then really come back to all of the suggestions, and hopefully at our May meeting and in conversations with other boards and officials, really looking forward to seeing what we can do. But you all presented so much rich information, and thank you for being here. And for those who are here but hadn't said anything, thank you for listening as well. So I think our meetings typically go about 90 minutes. We are going to need to go a little bit over. So we're going to adjourn the sort of discussion portion of the meeting around affordable housing. Of course, it is a public meeting. You're all more than welcome to stay, but we're going to kind of conclude that portion and move to a few other items that we have on the agenda. We do have a few items that we need to deliberate on. So I'm going to sort of move us through those items next. Apologies, I have many pages of notes. I need to scroll back up to see what is next. So the next item on the agenda, and Chris, hopefully you can stay for at least a brief minute on this one. We wanted to give a couple of updates on the MVP program, which was mentioned several times. Chris, I wanted to pass it to you if you wouldn't mind, if you wanted to give an update around the Work with Multicultural Bridge and the event on May 5th. And we can see if anyone from Bridge is here to expand on that, but wanted to pass it over to you to cover that update.
Sure. And again, sorry, my connection is unstable, so I stopped my video. So for the past 2 years, the town has been implementing an MVP action grant through the Sustainability Committee. Oh, Is that me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, let me see if I need to
Yes.
mute someone else. Keep going.
This year, one of our goals is to we have been working with Multicultural Bridge to summarize and celebrate and advance the work that we did last year. So last year, after a very intense training and engagement process, we came up with those 4 key themes that I mentioned earlier: access to food, parks, housing, and transportation. And we came up with actions for each of those. And we're trying to further each of those this year in various ways. The MVP program with our partners, Multicultural Bridge and Woven Roots Farm, are looking to advance both the food access and the open space access pieces. Now, on May 5th, Bridge is taking part in a multi-town event, which is a film screening, I think. I'm going to get this wrong. I'm sorry. But they have invited us as their partners to be there and to celebrate with them and to promote some of the work that we did through MVP regarding open space and parks access. We'll welcome people to downtown, to Giggle Park behind Town Hall. We have a bilingual park brochure developed and a link to an online parks mapping system where people can learn about the parks, what the parks have to offer, so that they can access parks where they feel welcome, where they can socialize together as a group, as a community, where they can access forest trails, cooling centers, like Lake Mansfield and things like that. So yeah, really exciting. So that's May 5th. So please come on downtown, Town Hall. I think we start at 5, is that right?
Did you all see what I screen shared? I don't know if this is helpful because we don't have chat. I pulled this from Bridge's Instagram page. It has a schedule. I don't know if you all can all read this, the bottom.
Oh, great.
Can you see it, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At 4 at Giggle Park. Yeah.
And also, I want to add to what you just said that I feel is important. One of the things that just came up over and over again in conversations with Gwendolyn and in our work together in the trainings and amongst the core team was building trust and relationships with town officials. And so I feel like this is such an important manifestation of, not just access to a park, which is very, that's incredibly important, but that the conversations that it's going to be at Town Hall, at Giggle Park. And I think that you had talked to other town staff about it and that there was going to be potentially other folks there, but just the, just that going back to what Jane said about building relationships, that continued aspect of building relationships, maybe repairing relationships and building trust amongst citizens, particularly folks who experience marginalization and people who are decision makers and have power.
Yeah, thanks, Jovina. I appreciate that.
Fantastic.
And there's going to be food there. So I think that's very important also to say.
Thank you. And thanks for bringing that back and for sharing that, Chris. We're looking forward to the event. In the minutes, we'll include more details. I believe and check out Multicultural Bridge's Instagram page. They have a lot of posts about this, as well as some information that they've been sharing that were takeaways from the engagement process at MVP that they're enriching with some photos about the community. And there's just some really great information there if you have social media. I think let's move on to 2 more items related to MVP. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say, so this committee has been so critical to the implementation of the MVP program over the last 2 or 3 years. So thank you, and particularly Natalie and Jovanina. And then more recently in our food project, also to John, but all of you have been participating in these discussions and the trainings, Mark and Aretha, and Jane too, and Vivian too. So even if you're not on the committee, but that's the way these projects get done, is engaged volunteers. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think Deb, I think Rachel just jumped off. Luke was here, Jeremy. A lot of these folks participated in the trainings. That's where I got to meet Jane, and so yeah, thank you. I think it was this MVP grant was really helpful in forming and providing formation on some of the work. So the next item is very much related to that, and the next items are relatively quick. I'm hoping, depending on citizen speak, we hopefully will be done in 20 minutes or so. We'll see. The next item for committee members is a deliberation item. So Chris is here. If you want to speak to it, you're welcome to. I sent you all a letter of support that we drafted in support of the town's next MVP application that we would like to discuss, deliberate on, and potentially put to a vote so that we can provide that to Chris and town hall staff in support of their next application. So especially for our committee members, Aretha, Mark, John, Jovina, myself, has everyone had a chance to review that letter? And would it be helpful to just take a moment to familiarize yourself with it before we move to a vote or move to a potential for a vote? Okay, so everybody had a chance to read it. It's not very long. Okay, great. So for the
I didn't put a dollar amount in there, did I? I didn't want to.
Let me see.
Because I wasn't sure where
No.
I'd fall.
No, you didn't.
Okay, good.
I don't, no, there's no dollar amount. Okay, so then, yeah, that you can work on that with your application. Okay, fantastic. So is there anything else that folks would like to say or ask questions about this? As everyone knows, letters of support from committees are very important as part of state grant applications, and this work really builds, as you can see from the letter. We'll post this with the minutes, I believe, if it's approved. This really builds, it's for funds to improve Lake Mansfield, but it's really building on a lot of the work that came up in MVP. And this is sort of outlined in the letter. We heard from community members that Lake Mansfield is a really important place. It's also an important cooling site. It's in need of infrastructure investment, but it's also in need of investment for interpretive signs, bilingual signage, ways to make the space more welcoming for diverse community members. So this letter just sort of integrates that. And if funding is received, we hope that the committee will continue to be very involved in the implementation of this project if funding is received. Are there any questions or comments about the letter before I see if there's a motion to approve it?
And Chris, do you want to add anything else before we move to approve the letter?
No, thanks for summarizing it, Natalie. It's the Lake Mansfield improvements are an exciting project, not just for ecological reasons, because we need to make certain improvements to stop stormwater runoff, which is polluting the lake, et cetera, et cetera. That's critical, but these other improvements for accessibility, for bilingual signage, all of that will go a long way to making the space even more welcoming as a community recreation space. So yeah, it has multiple benefits. So hopefully we're successful. This is kind of the first phase of well, I say it's the first phase, but we've been working on Lake Mansfield for 10 or 15 years. This is the first phase of the big phase of Lake Mansfield infrastructure improvements. So after this, if we're successful, we would seek funding to implement the town's decision to remove that portion of Lake Mansfield Road between the boat launch and the beach area to turn it into a recreation only path. That's not technically the subject of this application. We're focusing on the beach parking lot, beach area, and the north end outlet. But it's all big, it's all interrelated, and I'm really happy that it builds on all of the work that we've done together as a group, not only these last couple of years, but for the last 10 years.
Thank you. Any questions about this or any further comments?
Just excited to see this. Thank you guys for putting it together, and really appreciate the work to go beyond the norm and put interpretive signage in. I think it's a really important step forward.
Thank you. Fantastic. All right, is there a motion to approve this letter of support for the MVP application?
Move to approve it.
I motion.
Okay, I heard John make the motion. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, second. All right, let's do a roll call vote. So again, I'll say your name. Please say aye if you approve. John,
Aye.
Aretha,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Jovanina,
Aye.
Natalie, yes, aye. Great, this motion is approved at 7:10 p.m.
Thanks. Cross your fingers. It's due a week from today. So not only that we get it, but also that I complete the application in time. Thank you very much.
Sending you good vibes,
Thank you.
coffee,
And you
and
know that you can ask for help if you need it.
Thank you. I do.
perfect. Chris, I believe we'll make sure that you have the final letter with our edits and signatures
Thanks.
shortly. Great. So thank you for that. We'll stay tuned as to how that application goes, and we'll certainly be talking about it in future meetings. The next item related to MVP is, Aretha, did you have a brief update related to the project with youth?
Yes, just some basic information for those of you who are joining us. Part of the MVP, more regional part of the MVP planning process has been a culvert assessment project done in the towns of Lenox, Stockbridge, New Marlborough, and Pittsfield. And Green Acres has been, paired with quite a few other organizations, but we've been sort of doing the actual surveying with a crew of some young people. It started last fall, and now it's starting up again now in the spring. And basically what they're doing is assessing culverts all over those areas. Right now we're in Stockbridge. I think they're averaging like 6 culverts a day. And by like May 10th, they should have all of the culverts assessed in Stockbridge. So after they are assessed and sort of put through this sort of a digital model to simulate flood risk and like stormwater, but also snow melting and things like that. They sort of, the towns have areas that they want to focus on even more, priority areas. So then the kids kind of get to decide what sort of solutions can come up for these areas with the risk and the inevitable risk of more floodwater hitting these parts for the next, well, they actually do the study for up to 100 years. So it's only getting worse. So it's really cool to see young people involved with this project. Most of the work is also being done with HVA. So there's really amazing experts coming out and working one-on-one with the kids to input the information, measure, test the water, test for wildlife, different things happening around that area. So yeah, it's really cool. I'm hoping to bring a couple of young people to May's meeting that have been working on this project. But otherwise, yeah, if anyone has any other questions, they can let me know.
Fantastic. Are there any questions or comments on this? And thank you so much for sharing about the project. This is super exciting.
And I also just want to invite anyone who is a participant to raise your hand. We are generally pretty informal, so Deb and Jeremy and Carrie Ann, we don't have to stand in ceremony. And if you would like to say anything or ask anything about any of our agenda items, please feel free.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we usually promote everyone but this meeting was bigger, so we kept it more formal webinar. Thank you. Okay, so we'll,
Carrie Ann has a question. Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
It's not a question. I just want to tell you all that you're just so amazing. And I'm just so proud of all of the work that you're doing, and that there's like, these are 2 different projects, and that like the web of like interconnectedness and like of our community partners and stakeholders, and that I'm just, I love sharing across the state the amazing work that you're doing. And so this is just to congratulate you all on your amazingness.
Well, I appreciate your congratulation, and you are a keystone and a key component, and your imagination and your creativity, your hard work and your visioning is a big piece of this as well. So just to send it right back to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Agreed. All right. Anything else on our many interconnected MVP grants and agenda items, which we will come back to next month for sure?
This is Chris. So Tate Coleman is interning in my office, and he did mention that he had hoped to connect with your committee at one point to talk about transportation. And since that is one of the MVP areas of focus that came out of our discussions, and it is one of the areas that we're working very hard on, maybe there'll be an opportunity for you to do that at a future date.
That's really helpful, because you're right, there were several items that came out of our engagement: open space and parks, food, transportation was one of them, which we really haven't talked about significantly yet, but it did emerge. So would love to get connected with Tate, and perhaps he can come to a future meeting to discuss transportation and what we may be able to do. Great. Awesome that he's interning with you.
Natalie and I actually met with him maybe the day or 2 days before the shutdown.
No, we were literally sitting there and the governor had issued the state of emergency, and I got it on my phone, and it was like whatever that day was, like March 7th or 11th, 2020. Yeah. Okay. So, all right, we'll move past MVP for now. So the next item, we have to approve our past meeting minutes. We only have one. This is from February. We did not have a quorum in March, so we do not have minutes, and then we were therefore not able to approve the minutes from February. So does everyone have those minutes? Does anyone need another moment to minutes? Do you need another moment to review the minutes before we see if we can approve them? Okay, great. All right. If not, is there a motion to approve the February minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All right, we'll do a quick roll call vote. Mark?
Yay.
Aretha?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Giovanina?
Yay.
Natalie? Yay. Great. All approved. All right, fantastic. We'll send those to Town Hall for posting, and we will have minutes from this month because we did have a quorum. Okay, I do recognize the time. Depending if we have any citizens speak, we don't have many people left, so we may not. Are folks on the committee okay with perhaps 10 more minutes? I know we usually only have 90 minutes for this meeting, but we had a special component.
As long as it's not 10 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm okay with it.
Ooh, all right, we'll try.
My 4-year-old just peed on the couch, so things are steadily going like this. So just keep me in the loop.
Oh goodness, I can't.
We can go less than 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, we can try to breeze through. I think we will still have a quorum as well if only you leave. So that's fine as well, I believe. So feel free to jump if you need to. Okay, so then the next item, this is just very brief, is just a quick update on the compost project. But before we talk about the compost project, I did want to note, spoke to Mark, and you can speak for yourself on this, but I think Mark has agreed, after being a founding committee member, to cycle off after next month's meeting, which I want to spend some time on our May meeting to really celebrate everything that you've brought to our work together and to the committee in so many ways, and I could go on and on. Key grant writer of the MVP project that got us to all of these discussion points. So just noting that, I think we're going to want to save some time in our May meeting to really just kind of celebrate and debrief on everything you've done for us. So I just wanted to say that, and then pass it over to you if you wanted to say anything, as well as we could talk a little about the compost project.
Yeah, well, looking forward to chatting more in May. May will be my last meeting. And thank you, Natalie and Jovanina, for continuing to do a great job organizing all of us, and to all the other committee members, of course. And on the compost note, unfortunately, the grant that we were going to apply for, the funding ran out for this fiscal year. So, in the next month, I'm just going to tee up an application for when the funding renews. I'm blanking on the name of that grant off the top of my head. And then something I'm actually currently investigating is there's a program that allows for subsidized compost home composters through the state of Massachusetts, and the town of Egremont and Sheffield are enrolled in this program, but Great Barrington is not. So I'm going to just do a little research to try to figure out if there's an easy way to enroll Great Barrington in that program so that residents can purchase a home composter for $25.
Doesn't Pittsfield have that too, Mark? I think
There's a bunch of Berkshire County towns.
Love it. Right. Thank you. I don't recall the name of the grant either, but I know we have it in minutes. But all right. Anything else on compost? I think we'll come back to that in a bit more detail at our next meeting, and then we'll also do some work to prepare for those items that Mark listed in the coming months.
I guess just in Mark's soon to be departure from the committee, I'm down to, with my upcoming situation of being home with the baby this summer, I'm down to kind of take over and continue the grant writing when it becomes available. So just to let you guys know, even though Mark is usually more on top of things.
I'll tee us up for success.
Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you. And congratulations again, Aretha. And thanks for being willing to do some of that while you're on maternity leave. But that sounds great. And we will, I don't think we've thought too much about the fact that we have several vacancies now. We'll still be able to achieve a quorum, but we'll probably need to fill a few vacancies. So that's something that we'll need to address shortly. So, all right. Okay, so that's the compost project. I do recognize maybe we can take like 3 to 4 minutes on the food plan update, and then just check in on meeting dates very briefly, and then we'll see if we have any citizens speak, and then hopefully we can adjourn and by 1:30.
Just to say about the food plan, we'll have a lot more to say in the future. So this is just a little bit, this is brief and more.
Okay, great. And I think I'm going to pass it to you, John, for that.
Sure. Thanks, Natalie. So for the past several months, Jovanina and I have been part of the core team, along with Vivian and Luke Prisma and Chris Rembold, guiding the Growing Better Great Barrington grant. That grant facilitated a collaboration between the town and a group of graduate students from the Conway School of Design to produce a policy relevant report aimed at imagining a more resilient local food system, in the context of climate change, in the context of long-term sustainability. That report is complete. The process involved 2 community forums, lots of meetings with stakeholders, and lots of meetings with the core team and the Conway team. The report's, I think, 125 pages or so, beautifully illustrated with some really interesting graphics, organized around 3 primary recommendations with lots of sub-recommendations. Those 3 primary areas of recommendation are around accessing land and a lot of discussion around affordability and different mechanisms for making affordable land available to farmers. affordable housing as well. The second area was around food processing infrastructure, developing food processing infrastructure locally, whether that is, for instance, meat processing, or whether that's a commercial grade kitchen to do value added food products. And then the third area of recommendation was around regional coordination, around different food initiatives, from food access to land access and farming initiatives. So I think, in that category, there were several sub-recommendations, but one of the ideas was to imagine either an individual or a body of individuals that would help to enhance regional coordination around food systems initiatives. So those are the three broad areas of recommendation. I encourage everyone to read the report. There will be a coffee talk to go public with some of these recommendations for the report, or from the report, on May 4th at 10 a.m. And Jovanina and Luke will be there to represent the core team along with Chris, and to talk a bit about the report. And the core team is continuing to meet and to think a little bit about how we can promote some of the which recommendations and how we can promote the recommendations in the report.
Great.
Thanks.
Fantastic. I see, Eileen, you've got a hand raised.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is the May 4th talk going to be by Zoom, and is it open to the public?
It's that coffee with the town manager thing. Yeah, Prahinsky has been holding. So yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Mhm.
John, I'm taking minutes, and I'm sorry, would you mind saying again the third: accessing land, food processing infrastructure, and what was the third recommendation?
Regional coordination, enhancing regional coordination.
Okay.
Given that there are so many organizations and initiatives underway in this region.
Very cool. Something that we've talked about. It's great that that came up in the recommendations. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the food plan? I'm assuming we'll come back to it in much more detail at a future meeting once everyone has had time to read and review and go through the presentation on May 4th. All right. And great work. I know it was Vivian, John, Jovanina, Chris, and Luke, I think, is gone from this meeting. Thank you for the time that y'all put into being on that core team. And so much of what came up in that, in those sessions, especially around the intersection between housing and growing food, it came up here today. And thanks for planting those seeds, and especially the community forums. I know that came up a lot. So thanks for all the work there. All right. Anything else on food plan before we move to some schedule? All right. Okay. Real quick. The next two meeting dates based on our current cadence would be Wednesday, May 25th and Wednesday, June 22nd, both at 5:30 p.m. Are there any committee members who have conflicts with either of those? Knowing May is Mark's last meeting, but June. Okay. Oh.
My due date is June 18th, so.
We may, let's probably just not have a meeting in June. Who knows? Yeah, who knows?
I'll just keep it posted.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, maybe nice. Yeah, it might be nice to take.
What's the problem? You can show up to a meeting.
Yeah, we may need to take a hiatus from meetings, perhaps for maybe a month or two, at least until we fill some vacancies. So, all right, let's plan for May 25th at 5:30. Let me know if anyone has conflicts with that. Okay,
I think we should plan for June too, just to get it on our calendars, because if we want to meet and we need to come back to a meeting, I think it's just would be wiser to get it there and then cancel it than have to.
Yeah, or we can hold the time, and if we do not have a quorum, we can have an informal meeting, which we've done in the past. So okay, so hold May 25th and June 22nd. I'll send calendar invites as usual. June 18th. Okay, great. All right, so we have concluded our lengthy agenda. I know that there are a few hi or bye
Chris,
Thanks, Chris, for being here.
For ending your day. I mean, maybe it's not ending, who knows? Ending your
Is there
day
another
with
meeting?
us.
2 hours.
Bye.
Thank you, Chris. All right. I do know we have a few citizens on the line. I don't see any additional hands raised, but I just wanted to hold it one moment. Are there any citizens or anyone else who would like to share anything or speak? And I would also encourage folks, you're welcome to get in touch with me if there are things that you want to put on a future agenda, particularly for May or June. We can save time. But are there any things that folks want to mention before we move to conclude our meeting? Okay. Do not see any hands raised. So we'll assume that we can formally adjourn the meeting at 7:30 p.m. And we'll get you all back to the things that are going on in your homes. But thanks everyone for coming and for participating with your full selves, and looking forward to our next meeting. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks,
Well, stay warm.
Eileen, for being here. Bye.
And
Thank
thanks
you.
again, everyone. Bye.